Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you how to find slope from a graph. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to pick 2 points on a graph and then count the rise over run to find slope. So go ahead and get out your binder, turn to the math section, and get ready to take some notes. Before we learn about what rise over run means, let's go ahead and remember just what we should know so far about slope. So the first thing we should know is that slope is a fraction. Slope is always going to be written as a fraction. It tells you how steep your line is. So it's a fraction because when we looked at like unit rate or rate of change, we looked at fractions like miles per hour or dollars per ounce. And we knew that when we had that fraction or that rate or that slope, that we had an equation. We also had a graph and we had a table. So when we looked at it on a graph, we looked at four different types of slope. We had positive slope where your line was increasing. We had zero slope where it was flat the whole way. We had negative slope where it was decreasing. And the last type was a vertical line called undefined slope where the slope didn't really make sense. Here's Mr. Slope Guy to help you remember this. There's a positive slope, a negative slope, an undefined slope, and a zero slope. And the way that I remembered it also is that if you put yourself on a dirt bike on the line, you start from left to right and you climb it, you want to see what's happening as you move left to right. Is it increasing, decreasing? Is it zero? Or can you not even put your bike on it? Would it just fall off? So that's all we know about slope so far. So what you'll see today is lines that aren't proportional. You know that this line does not go through the origin, so it's not proportional. However, it is a straight line, and straight lines do have slope. You can look at this line and you can say it's a positive slope, because if I put myself on it on a dirt bike, and moved left to right, I'd be going uphill. It's increasing, so it's a positive slope. But what actually is the slope, and how do I find it from this graph? Let's go ahead and learn how to do that today. Here's the formal definition of how to find the slope from a graph. To find the value of slope from a graph, you'll find the ratio of vertical change compared to the horizontal change. So ratio is a fraction, and we know that slope is a fraction. And what we're going to start calling it, in easier words, is the rise over the run. So here's how you do it for real. You do this by choosing any 2 points on the graph line. So let's start there with this example. The first step is to choose any 2 points on the graph line. So this graph is made of points. This line right here follows points every time that it touches at one of these intersections. So I'll start out by plotting all of the points on this line. There's a point here, there's a point here, and here, because it's crossing on this little grid behind it. Anytime that it crosses on the grid, those are points. So for example, I didn't choose this because it's not crossing on the grid, so it's not a point that I can plot. So these are all the points that are on this line. So I'm going to just go ahead and it says choose two. So I'm just going to focus on these 2 points. So it doesn't matter which 2 points you pick on the line. It just says the first step is to choose any 2 points on the graph line. Then draw a right triangle to count the rise over the run. Here's what I mean by that. You start at one of your points. Always start at the point on the left. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to count how many times I have to go up and over to get from one point to the next. Let me show you that again. I want to count my rise, how many times I go up. In this case, it's just one. I went from here to here, so up one. And then I went to the right, 1, 2. That's my run. So I went up 1, over 2. Since slope is just a ratio or a fraction of my rise over my run, my slope is literally just 1 over 2. Up 1 over 2 to get from point to point. The last step says to always simplify your ratio or fraction when possible. And then you should also double check just to see if your graph was positive or negative. So let's go ahead and look back at that graph example. The slope I got was 1/2 or 1 over 2, and that's as simple as it can get. 1/2 cannot be simplified anymore because it's a simplified fraction. And it is a positive slope, so my slope is positive. 1/2 is a positive number. That's it. I'm done. Here's another way you could have done this problem, and this is what they're talking about when they say simplify. Let's say, for example, that you chose these 2 points, because remember, you can choose any 2 points on the graph. You would have done from this point on the left, right here, up 1, 2, so rise 2, over 1, 2, 3, 4. So you would have done a run. Remember, running is when you go left to right. You would have run 4. So your fraction you would have gotten for rise of a run would have been 2 over 4. Up 2 over 4. 2 over 4 can be simplified. 2 over 4 is a simplified fraction of 1/2. So 2 over 4 is right, but 1/2 is better because it's simplified. They're both correct slopes for this line. So this line is increasing at a rate of 1/2. Let's see if you can practice all by yourself on this graph. It says follow the steps to find the slope of the graph shown. Go ahead and pause the video now, try all these steps, and then press play when you're ready to check. Okay, so you should have looked at this graph by yourself and realized that first of all, you know it's a positive slope. If I put myself on the graph, moving from left to right, it is increasing. You also know that whenever you count the rise, you're literally just going to count how many times it went from this point to get to this point. So we're going to start by counting up and over. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4 times up. To get from this point to this point, we had to go 4 times up. That's the rise. The run is how many times you went over. So 1, 2, 3. So we went from one point to the next, up 4, over 3. So you would write that as a slope of 4 over 3. We want to check and see if we can simplify that. 4 over 3 is fully simplified. We write it as a fraction, and we know it's a positive slope because it's increasing. So we leave it as a positive 4 over 3. And that's it. 4 over 3 is the slope of this graph. So let's continue practicing this on questions 2 through 7. It says, find the slope of the graphed line. The first line has the points chosen for you. But on these other examples, you get to choose your own 2 points. So let's go ahead and take a second. If you feel comfortable, go ahead and pause the video and try finding the slope of each one of these graphs all by yourself. Then press play whenever you're ready to check. Okay, so hopefully you got to try these on your own. Let's at least start with number 1, and hopefully you got this one. We want to count the slope from point to point. Remember, the slope tells you how slanty your line is, tells you how steep your line is. This is a positive slope because if I move left to right, the line is increasing. We also know that if we count the rise over the run, we'll be able to find our slope. Slope is just a ratio of the rise over the run on a graph. So we start by counting the rise from point to point. We go up 1 and then over 1, 2, 3, 4. We went up 1 over 4. So 1 over 4 is the slope of this line. Let's go and look at the second one. The first thing we need to do is pick 2 points. So I'm just going to pick the first 2 points that I see. Remember, the points are whenever they touch on the little grid behind it at the crosses. So those are 2 points. This is a little bit different because this slope is negative. You can see if you start from the left to the right, you're falling down. You're going downhill. So you can count the rise over the run, but you're going to make sure that at the end it's negative. So I'm going to count up 1 and then back 1, 2. To get from point to point, it's up 1 over 2. However, this is a negative slope, so my slope has to have a negative in front of it. Here's another way to do this problem. You pick those 2 points, let's say here and here, just like we did, and instead of counting up this way, you can count down 1. I might count down 1. If I go down 1, I'm going to write negative 1, and then over a positive 1, 2. So it's still going to be a negative 1 over positive 2. That's another way to look at it if you want to look at it like that. Either way, your slope is negative 1/2. Let's look at this third example, and let's pay attention to this one because it's a little bit different as well, because the units on the y-axis are different. It's going up by 3s each time. So if you didn't realize that when you did it the first time, go ahead and double check that. Pause the video now, and then press play when you're ready to check it. We always want to start by picking 2 points. So I'm just going to pick the first 2 points that I see. There's a point, and then there's a point right there. So there's 2 points that I've chosen. You could have chosen any 2 points. We always want to count from point to point. We want to start by counting our rise and then our run. Because slope is how many times you go up and then over. It's always going to be up, then over. So it's a ratio of change in y over change in x. So let's count how many times we went up. So from 9 to 27, we went up 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. So we went up 18. We went over 1, 2, 3, 4. If you notice, these are all units of 1. So this is up 18 over 4. That fraction is 18/4 and can be simplified. 2 goes into 18 and 4, so my simplified fraction is 9 over 2, or 9/2. It's a positive slope, so my answer is going to be positive. Look at the next one. This one should be a little bit easier because it's a proportional relationship. So you could look right here and find that the unit rate is a little greater than 1, so your answer is going to be a little greater than 1. You also should realize that you've actually seen this graph before. It's right here. It's the same exact graph. It starts at 0, 0, so I'm going to plot my first point at the origin, and my next point is here. I go up 4 over 3. So 4 over 3 is my slope. Remember, I'm counting from point to point, up and over. That's why we call it our rise over our run. This next graph is the slope of an undefined line. We can't count up and over. We can only count up from point to point. Since you can't count over, it's actually like saying up 1 over 0, and you can't divide by 0. If you don't believe me, try it on your calculator. Anything divided by 0 doesn't work. It's undefined. So when it asks you for the slope of this line, you would literally just write undefined. For this last example, this graph is also a straight line that goes through the origin, so it's another example of a proportional relationship. However, it is a negative relationship. It's got a negative slope. So I put myself on it, I'd be going downhill. So I know the slope is negative, and I want to count from point to point. So I'm going to start at the origin, and I'm going to just pick another point. We can say this one. You can also say this one. Doesn't matter. We're going to start by counting up or down, and then right or left. So we'll start here at this point, and we'll go down 1, 2, and then to the right 1, 2. So we went down 2 over 2. Down 2 over 2 is the same thing as 2 over 2 as a fraction. Just simplifies to 1. And remember, since it's got a negative slope, it would be a negative 1. Another way you could have done this, you could have picked your 2 points that are right here and here. You went up 1 and then to the left 1 or back 1. So it's 1 over 1. That's the same thing as we just did, except we already know that any number has an imaginary 1 underneath of it. So 1 over 1 is the same thing as just 1. And then remember to always check to see, since your slope is negative, the answer should be a negative slope. Guys, that's it. If you made it to the end of this video, please put in the comments whether you prefer a sweatshirt or a hoodie. Today we learned about finding slope from a graph. So now you should be able to pick 2 points on a graph and then count the rise over the run to calculate the slope. Now you should go back to your calendar and complete any other assignments you have left for the day. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye!